Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of our series in which we are converting this 1976 TR6 from Zenith-Stromberg carburetors to fuel injection system. And what we are installing here is the throttle body injection system developed by Rick Patton and called Patton machine. There are links in the description of the video to Rick Patton's website where you can go and buy this system if you want. And there's 2 episodes that if you haven't seen yet, maybe it's better if you go and see the first 2 episodes of this series before you watch this third one, because we've done a lot of progress installing this system already. In the first episode, we mostly unpacked the system and we explained all the components, what they do, how they communicate with the other components of the system, with the ECU in particular, and in general what their entire role into the system is. In the second episode, we ran the wiring harness that comes with the kit, and we found places for all the components, what is going to go where. So we run the harness to each and every component and make sure that it reaches there and it can be plugged in. We explained also how to do the hard wiring, because all the components of the Patton machine are plug and play, but there's some wires that need to be hardwired to the car, of course, like the main power, ignition power, and few other wires that need to be hooked up here and there. So we've done that in the second episode. We completed all the wiring that was needed. And then now in the third episode, what's left is to convert the distributor to electronic ignition, and in this case convert it from one electronic ignition to another type of electronic ignition. This electronic ignition comes with the kit, or you can order it with the kit. Let me rephrase that. You can buy the kit without that and you can use your Pertronix electronic ignition, for example. That's going to work, but your timing is not going to be mapped by the ECU. That's why it's strongly recommended that you convert your distributor as well. So we're gonna do that in this video, and then we're gonna go and convert the Zenith-Stromberg carburetors into throttle bodies. And we're gonna install the injectors on them. Also, we're gonna install a throttle position sensor, because that's important for the ECU to know when the throttle is open and how much, very important, how much it is also open. We also need to install the fuel pressure regulator and run all the lines to the injectors and whatever lines we need to run. So I don't know if that's going to be part of this video or the next one, but let's just start from somewhere and we'll see where we're going to finish. So without further ado, let's get crack-a-lacking. Okay, so let's take care of the distributor. It's pretty dirty, but we're gonna do half of the job. I mean, we're gonna remove whatever needs to be removed, and before we start putting back on things that need to be put on, we're gonna take it and clean it. So I'm gonna clamp it to my vise here, and I'm gonna clamp the shaft so it can't spin anymore. And of course, I'm using soft jaws here. We don't want to damage anything. So while we're taking it apart, let's talk a little bit about the electronic ignition. So as you can see here, this one has a Pertronix electronic ignition, and frankly, the TBI system can work with it as well. The TBI cannot work with points only. It needs to be electronic ignition, but any kind of electronic ignition would work well for the TBI. And in fact, you can buy the kit without the module for the distributor. But there's one problem with that. You want to take as much of the performance possible out of this engine, right? And a big disadvantage of the old distributors is the way they advance. We have mechanical advance underneath, which is basically weights that open and close depending on the RPM. So we can take advantage of the mechanical advance only when the RPM is already raised. We also have a vacuum advance, but for the vacuum advance, it also takes time. Once you press the throttle pedal, then the vacuum increases, not the manifold vacuum, the vacuum on the other side of the throttle. So that's very important to know when we're talking about vacuum advance, which vacuum we're talking about. The vacuum retard is using vacuum from the manifold. The vacuum advance though is using vacuum from the other side of the throttle. So as soon as you hit the throttle pedal, that's when the vacuum in the manifold also sucks from the other side of the plate, and that's when we get vacuum to the advance. So then the diaphragm here moves, and that moves the entire plate here. It also takes time. So this is a problem that is still not resolved with Pertronics or any other kind of electronic ignition. We still rely on the vacuum advance, and we still rely on the mechanical advance underneath. However, if we install the electronic ignition that comes with the throttle body injection system by Rick Patton, then we allow the ECU to control the timing. The ECU can communicate with the electronic ignition module and map the ignition timing, tell the distributor to fire early or late. So that's why I strongly recommend installing the electronic ignition with the kit, because you can take advantage of that. You can map the timing, and then I'm telling you, the response is so fast. As soon as you hit the throttle pedal, the TPS senses that, the throttle position sensor, tells the ECU, and the ECU commands the distributor to advance the timing right away. So that's why we're gonna install the ignition that comes with the system. We're gonna have to reuse this rotor, but this entire plate together with the electronic ignition we don't need, so we're gonna remove it by removing these two screws here. I'm not sure if we're gonna have to remove the pickup thingy as well. This is also part of the electronic ignition. We're gonna pack this nicely and give it to Tom to keep for spare. Yeah, oh, that's actually different here. That's not a spring. How does this attach? You know what, let me remove also the electronic ignition from here. This is the lever that I'm talking about. How does this attach here? This usually is a spring that comes out here and attaches to this plate and moves it. This one, I think it's even seized. Oh no, actually works. But how do we... But it looks like we're gonna have to force it, because it's not a spring anymore. Okay, that worked. So now we should be able to take the whole plate out. That's it. And now we can put back the electronic ignition back here, because this is gonna go in Tom's glove box, just in case, right? People were concerned that what happens if my TBI gives way. In the first place, I think it's much more reliable than how our cars are right now. But even if something happens with this electronic ignition, let's say, you have yours in the glove box, and you can convert it back to this electronic ignition in, like, how long does it take now to undo it? Of course, we're gonna take out the weights now and everything down there, so it's gonna be a little bit more complicated. But if you know what you're doing and you have all your components in the glove box, it's absolutely doable on the side of the road. So this goes in the glove box. Now we have to remove the weights and the dog from there. Is it a dog? Do you call it a dog? I don't know. I call it a dog because that's what we call it in Bulgarian, if I remember well. Come on. I hate those springs. Okay. We only need to remove them from the pins, the side pins. We can leave them on the dog, because in case we want to use them again. Okay. We can leave them here, right? So that's gonna go in the glove box as well. And the two weights, these are for our mechanical advance. I'm not gonna explain here how it works. Just from the centrifugal forces, they open and they advance the distributor. So that's it. Now we have the shaft that spins with this plate, all these parts here are fixed. So I'm gonna take it now and I'm gonna clean it, but before that I want to explain how we're gonna assemble the new one. Well, it's super easy. That's our new shaft with the reluctor, if I'm saying that correctly. These notches here on the side, they need to match these two pins where the springs were attached before, because that's gonna lock this thing to the shaft. Now the instructions say that this shaft is directional and it can only be mounted in one position. In my case, I can turn it 180 though, so we're gonna talk about this positioning a little bit later. Then our pickup coil needs to go somehow here, so I guess this needs to lift like that, and then needs to drop down again like that. Okay, and then we use the screws that were here to hold it in place. This goes here, and we need to use also the big screw to hold the rotating thingy up there. And then when the shaft spins, these little wings here trigger the pickup coil and make the coil fire a spark like that, and that's it. But like I said, before we do all that, I'm gonna take it and clean it. Well, we don't have too many things attached to it. All right, it's kind of cleaned up. Well, not here. I spent some time with a wire brush like this. Well, there's something here, but I can't reach everywhere. But it's much better. And now we can start assembling it. However, I made a small mistake here. I should have paid attention which direction this dog was in this direction or in this direction, because that affects the position of our rotor. You see the slot here, now our rotor goes like this. So our rotor in this position of the shaft, our rotor can be either pointing this way or 180, right? So that's very important. Well, I mean, in the worst case scenario, we have to move our spark plug wires on top of the distributor cap 180 and it's gonna work, but we want our first cylinder to be like this. If this is the engine on this side, like you imagine this is the screw, this is where the cable for the tachometer comes, so this is kind of how the distributor sits and the engine is on that side. So we want cylinder 1 to be on this side. We want it like this, we don't want it like this, even though it can work. So it is the same here, of course, because we have the slot here on top, and if I took note where this slot was, I could have just taken this one out and put this one the same way, right? But I don't know if it goes this way or this way. So what can we do? Okay, it's not a big deal. You know how the distributor driving gear has certain orientation for top dead center of the firing stroke or the first cylinder, and that is 2 and 8 o'clock with the slot offset towards the engine. Well, we can imagine that we have that slot here and turn our shaft in such a way that it's going to match this slot. So that's this way. Now the slot is offset to that side, which is this side, so towards the engine, and we are at 2 and 8 o'clock, kind of. So in this position, we know that our distributor needs to point cylinder number 1. The slot here is on the opposite side of the metal part of the rotor, so that's how it goes. That's how it goes. So that's the position of our dog inside or whatever, because we want cylinder number 1 to be here. So that's it. We figured it out. Now let me install the... Now I can turn it because I want it to be oriented this way, but... And I can put this. Now I can lift this a little bit, but we're not gonna lose the orientation, right? Like this. Make sure that the things engage. Okay, let's put these screws now. As long as it doesn't touch, I'm good. Okay, we're not gonna forget the screw here, right? We need to put this screw so we don't lose our rotor. Okay, and now we can put our rotor. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and you see the air gap here. I hope you can. In the Patronix electronic ignition, apparently this gap can be anywhere between 30 and 45 thou. However, here it's recommended to be maximum 6 thou, and even in the instructions, Rick Patton recommends using a double folded print paper. Yeah, now I now I understand why, because the reluctor, I believe this is called the reluctor, is magnetic and it grabs my metal filler gauge. So yeah, now I understand why. Let me go and grab a piece of paper. Okay, that makes more sense. So there's a adjusting screw here. Let me move it to this. So let's loosen this. Okay, that makes it tighter. So that's the maximum actually that I can do. Can't go any tighter than that, but I think that's fine. Okay, I'm gonna take another screwdriver while holding this like that. Of course, no other screwdrivers available within reach, so I'm gonna use this bent one, which is kind of useless, but yeah. Okay, now I can tighten it. And make sure that it's not touching anywhere. Yeah, perfect. Okay, let's put it in the car. Okay, and just in case, I put the engine top dead center, and that's the first cylinder top dead center, not the sixth, because you can see how the slot is right now. 2 and 8 o'clock, and it is offset in that direction. So we are at top dead center of the first cylinder, so let's see when we engage the distributor whether the rotor is gonna point this way or that way. Take out this screw, careful not to drop it in the hole, and that's how it needs to go. So it kind of folds this way, it kind of goes through the slot this way, but it doesn't fold through. But if we turn it... What? How did it go that way? Well, I guess the slots on this dog and the slots for the rotor on top are oriented in such way that we can either have it pointing this way or that way. That's how it's gonna be. I mean, we can take out the drive gear and turn it maybe 20-30 degrees that way so the rotor points this way, but there's no point. So our first cylinder on the cap, where is my cap? So I'm guessing this is gonna be my first cylinder, or this. Probably this is gonna end up being my cylinder number 1. It is what it is. I've seen all kinds of cars all kinds of TR6. The first cylinder ends up being anywhere. So this one looks like this is gonna be the first. Anyway, it is what it is. I'm gonna mount it this way. Now these two wires need to plug in into those little pins underneath. Remember where we saw them N and P. And also there's a ground wire here that I'm assuming we can connect to this little screw. But I don't know which one goes to N and which goes to P. I'm gonna have to go and read the instructions. I'm assuming it's just open and close. It's a switch, right? So it doesn't really matter which one goes where, but I will go and check just in case. Okay, the instructions don't say anything, so I'm assuming that it doesn't really matter which one of these goes on which pin here. I'm just gonna plug them in anyway. So because I'm assuming it is switch, just like the points, right? Open and close. So it doesn't really matter which way you plug in the wires on the switch. So that's where this goes, and this ground wire we're gonna hook up here to this screw. Okay, perfect. And with that, our electronic ignition is complete. We still have to set the timing, which is going to be 14 degrees before top dead center at cranking, and from there the ECU is going to take care of the rest. But we're going to do that in another video when we plug in power and all that. For now we still have wires here dangling, so we want to take care of that before we put power to the ECU. So let's address the carburetors and convert them to throttle bodies. Alright, you probably remember this setup from the first video. Well, that's what's left from it. The components one by one went to where they belong, so this is what's left. Our adapters and our injectors and our throttle position sensor that we need to install on the carburetors. Oh, and one more thing, the throttle bypass, we need to blank our throttle bypass because we don't want it to be functional anymore. It's going to interfere with our vacuum and our air-fuel ratio, so we don't want that. Okay, so let's see what we have. So this is the adapter. We have to gut our carburetor and install the adapter in its place, and this is where the injector goes, in this hole, and the injector nozzle comes out of here on an angle, so of course it needs to be pointed towards the cylinders, not the other way around. This plug here is only for production. When they were machining these adapters, they had to drill a hole here so they can make a 90-degree turn here for the fuel supply. So this is where the fuel comes. There's a fuel gallery drilled this way, and then from here there's another gallery drilled that way, and it comes out here. I don't know if you see it, and supplies the injector with fuel right here on this side. And whenever the ECU commands the injector electrically from here, internally the injector opens, and now fuel comes down out of here. So that's how it works. So we don't need to touch this plug. Well, let's go and gut the carburetors. And again, I want to emphasize this is reversible process. You're not ruining your carburetors. You can always put them back together. Now, if you want to use the original domes as a cover, well, then you have to modify the domes. But if you don't want to use them, you can just make yourself a cover for here, or you can buy cover from Rick Patton. Actually, I have some here that were donated to me by a customer. He wanted to install the domes, so I installed domes, and he gave me his old covers. That's what the top of your carburetor is going to look like. But if you want to use the original domes, you're going to have to modify them a little bit. And actually, after we start the car and we start doing the cosmetic stuff at the end, like tightening up wires and hoses and make everything look nice, that's when we're going to actually machine different domes. We're going to keep the original domes from the carburetors for Tom, and we're going to take another set from old carburetors and we're going to modify them so we can use here. So for now, I'm gonna unplug these. We might need to reuse them, but I mean with new hoses, but for now this is from the charcoal canister. I'm gonna unplug this as well. This is the temperature sensor here. Let's just throw it on the other side for now. And first of all, fuel supply. We don't need that anymore. And I'm joking. Of course we're gonna keep all the parts, but this way it's more dramatic, isn't it? This line, this is again from the charcoal canister. If you have it in your car, it's perfectly fine. It can stay because that's the vent from the charcoal canister. It just brings back fumes that eventually can contain more unburned gas, and it delivers it right here. So let's start by undoing the domes. And these domes we're gonna keep, like we said. We're gonna save these screws with the dome. We have new screws that will hold the adapters there. Okay, so now we can pull this dome up. Wow, it hasn't been out for a long time, I guess. Then I'm gonna take this out just in case we don't want to bend it. Okay, now it's loose. Okay, so the dome is out. I'm gonna put this back like that. We don't need the spring anymore. So the air valve together with the diaphragm, they should come out, and the needle underneath. If we're gonna be storing that, we should be very careful not to bend the needles. We also don't need this little clamp here. This is for the chokes. Okay, this we're gonna keep in the bag as well. We gutted it. There's no more parts that we need to remove from inside. The choke here, the choke lever can stay as long as it is all the way closed and we don't open it. It is perfectly fine. We can see now the throttle plate from here. See? And that's it. Now I want to take care also of these things here on the side, so let's do that next. So first of all, on this side, let's plug in the old fuel supply, because we are not gonna use it, and the whole entire float bowl underneath is not gonna be used at all. It's gonna remain empty. But something I forgot to mention here is that in few episodes ago we made sure that we run the carburetors out of gas. We started the car, we shut off the fuel, and we made the engine burn all the gas in the float bowls. Otherwise, after we convert the carburetors to throttle bodies and we first start the car, we're gonna totally flood it, because now we don't have needle here, and if there's fuel in the float bowls, we're gonna suck it all at once together with the injectors, and it's gonna become a mess. So we made sure to burn all the fuel. And now we're plugging this in because it's not gonna be used, but we don't want the float bowl to be open to the atmosphere because obvious reasons, debris and moisture, etc, etc. Here as well we have a temperature compensator, so this opens and closes a small valve here behind this screw that takes air from here and delivers it here for whatever reasons. We're not going to explain that now. With this screw here on the side, you can adjust how much air can bypass the pump. So in this case, this screw is already closed, but in case yours is not, just tighten it all the way. That closes this bypass. However, we have also this bypass, which is throttle plate bypass. So some fuel can bypass the throttle plate even if it is closed completely. Again, I'm not gonna describe here in this video why this is happening. It is for a reason, but we don't care what the reason is. We don't want to have that anymore. So we have to make this bypass valve inoperable. We're gonna keep it, but just want to make it inoperable. In these particular carburetors, there is a screw here that you can adjust the tension on the spring inside. So I'm pretty sure that by adjusting the spring, we can make it inoperable, but somebody might touch this screw here and make it operable again. We don't want that. So we're gonna blank it off. There are 6 screws here. 3 of them have Phillips heads, 3 of them have flat screwdriver heads. So we have to undo only the 3 that have the flat screwdriver heads. These are the ones that hold the entire assembly to the carburetor. The other 3 are holding the assembly together. We don't want to take it apart completely, we just want to take it off of the carburetor. And this one is easy, the other one is going to be pain in the butt, but I'm showing you the easy one. The other one I'm going to do on my own later. Okay, there's a gasket here now. And this is the bottom of the valve. So basically what it does is it opens and closes the connection between these 2 ports and allows fuel to travel. However, if you can see here, the gasket has a little notch here, so my theory that you can adjust it with the screw from here is actually not going to work, because there's still going to be a little bit of fuel always going in between. So that's why we're going to use the plates that Rick Patton provides to blank this. Okay, so we're going to put the screws. These 2 go here, and the countersink one goes here. Now make sure that we don't lose them. And how does this go? Like this. Yeah. So that should close these 2 ports. So on this side we don't need a gasket. We don't actually need it on the other side as well, but since it is intact, I'm just gonna keep it. It's not gonna hurt. So let's put it back on. Okay, if we have any vacuum ports, just like this one, this also needs to be plugged. We're not going to use it. On some carburetors, you have a vacuum port here underneath, like on this one actually. We have one. Somehow it's full of gas. I don't know why, but it's plugged in, and we will keep it plugged in. Actually, let me see if I can find a better plug, because this one I don't like. Here. It is very, very important, all these ports, to be plugged. We can't have any vacuum leaks in the system, otherwise it's not going to work properly. It's the first thing to do when you're diagnosing this system, or even with carburetors. Make sure that you don't have any vacuum leaks. So this is done, this is plugged, this is done, this is done. On this side we don't have anything else. So this port we can still use. So how this works is we have this canister, right? The charcoal canisters. This is where we're catching all the fuel vapors, unused fuel or from the gas tank vent, and etc. So one line comes from the gas tank, this line comes from here, from the valve cover. So this catches all the unburned fuel inside the crankcase. Even on new engines and freshly rebuilt engines, we have a little bit of a blow-by around the piston rings. That's normal. A little bit of the air-fuel mixture goes around the piston rings and goes into the crankcase. That's why we have a vent on the crankcase, so it doesn't increase pressure and starts blowing oil out of the seals and gaskets. So we vent it through here, but we don't want to just vent it in the atmosphere, because there's a little bit of unburned fuel, like we said. So these vapors go into the charcoal canister, and some of them can be reused in the carburetors. But if the throttle plate is closed and we're just idling, then all these gases go into the charcoal canister. But the charcoal canister also can increase pressure inside if it is not vented. So it needs to be vented somehow, and this is the vent of the charcoal canister. It goes back to the carburetor. So when that pressure increases, it gets vented here into the carburetors, and again the air can be reused and burned. So that's the whole thing. So this here we can plug or reuse it the way it was, and I think we're gonna reuse it, but we're gonna have to change the hoses because they are pretty bad here. We don't want it to suck air from outside, we want to suck air from the valve cover. So we're gonna reuse it the way it is, and everything else is plugged in. So in this case, we can install our adapter now. So this is our adapter, we showed it already. Again, we have to make sure that the hole is towards the engine. That's how we install it. We don't install it like this or like this or like this. That's how it goes. It has this lip here, fits inside there, doesn't need a gasket. We're gonna use these screws that come with the kit. For now, I'm just gonna bolt the adapter. You can run it like that, it doesn't need to be closed. The covers on top are just decoration. So we're gonna install covers. Like I said, we're gonna take domes like this and we're gonna modify them to fit on top. But for now, we're just gonna put it this way. And we're ready to install the injector now, which Rick Patton asked me specifically to emphasize on how it needs to be installed, especially the O-ring at the bottom, so I'll show you now. Alright, so this is the injector and it has two O-rings. One fits right here in this groove, the other fits right here. This is the small one and it's called the lower O-ring. I'm just showing you where it goes, but that's not how we're gonna install it. We're gonna take the small one out. We're gonna lubricate it. It's very tempting to just shove it there and then push it into the groove, right? But the problem is that if it is installed here and you push it there, it might get pinched here because it goes into a groove, you see? And we don't want that to happen because it might get cut. This is automatic transmission fluid, ATF. We need to lubricate it generously. And now we can put it down, making sure that it is inside the groove. So, like literally I'm going around the edge, making sure that it's not sticking out of the groove anywhere. So we're gonna lubricate this part as well, so it slips nice and easy in. And of course we're gonna lubricate the other O-ring as well here. And now when we're installing it, it doesn't really matter the orientation this way. But this here is the groove in which the wire goes. So it's best if we plug it in first. And here there's direction. You see this looks like a little house inside. So you have to make sure that this is in the same direction. And that's actually the other one, that's the short one. I'm gonna take the longer one here. And we're gonna plug it in. Until it clicks. There you go. And again, lubrication, the O-ring is there, very, very gently with spinning motion. We just go back and forth with very, very gentle pressure. There you go. It went in. We're gonna spin it a few more times to make sure that it releases if it gets pinched somewhere. And now we're gonna put the retainer, which goes, I didn't show you that, but I'll bring the other injector to show you. This is the channel in which the retainer goes, like this. Okay, like that. And we can keep it like that, or I think it's easier if it goes underneath. Actually, it doesn't work this time. On the other TR6 it worked, and I actually rotated it. No, it doesn't work. I can't rotate it here, so it's fine. I only thought that maybe it's a better idea to be underneath for the wire here, but that's fine. So now we're gonna put the two screws, but before we tighten them, we're gonna orient it the way we want it to be oriented. Okay, they're not tight yet, so I can still turn it. So let's see how we should orient this. Wow, I want to know what electrical tape they use. It's stuck so well. Okay, so this is gonna have to be pinched a little bit and shoved in there like that. Okay, that works fantastic. So for now, that's how we're gonna leave it, but then we're gonna put the covers when we're done, and that's gonna pinch it nicely here. So that's it, this is done. This is not a carburetor anymore, this is a throttle body. So now we have one carburetor and one throttle body. I wonder what's gonna happen if we start the car this way. You wanna try? Okay, just kidding you. Alright guys, I'm gonna do the other one on my own. The only problem that I can see here is the bypass valve. It's gonna be hard to reach there, but I don't want to take the carburetor out. So I'm gonna turn you off because there's gonna be a lot of swearing. And I'm gonna bring you back when this one is also installed. And then we're gonna take care of the throttle position sensor on this side. Alright, the other one is converted as well. We did the exact same thing. Yeah, this was like really hard there. I used all kinds of little tools like this, for example, and this little ratchet. So it wasn't very easy, but it worked, so it's done. Okay, time to install the throttle position sensor, which goes on this bracket, which bracket goes on the two nuts here of the carburetor. But before that, we're gonna have to install this driver nut, which is going right here at the end of the throttle shaft. So let me show you how we're gonna do that. Okay, first of all, let's show how everything fits together. This is how the bracket goes there. This is where the throttle position sensor goes, like this. You see it has one flat side here. I'm gonna actually take the screws now out so it fits right inside like that. And as you can see here inside, there's two notches that fit inside the driving nut, and that's what drives the throttle position sensor. So as we're turning clockwise looking from this direction, this is how it goes. We have to be very careful not to overturn the mechanism inside, because if it goes past its range, we're gonna ruin it. So I'm gonna show you here the initial setting, which is rough, and then at the end, when we plug everything in and we turn the system on, we're gonna be able to turn the computer on and do the final adjustment of the TPS. So for now, we're gonna do the rough initial setting. Now, very important, before we even start installing anything, we have to test our linkage here and make sure that we have full range of our throttle plate. If we look at this lever here, this is where it's all the way closed. Actually, it's not all the way. So I'm gonna back these screws up a little bit now, because right now it's not all the way. Now it is all the way because we have the idle screws holding it up. I'm gonna loosen the other one as well. At this position, our throttle plate is fully closed. When this end of the lever hits here, is 100% open. You see, this is our 100%. So we make sure that this is happening, and not only by pushing on the linkage here, but also by pushing on the pedal. So let's go and test it with the pedal. There you go. I have full 100% operation of the throttle through the pedal as well. So that's very important to check, because if we don't have 100% operation here, we're gonna have issues with our throttle position sensor as well. In this case, we can remove this nut from here. And this nut, if I remember correctly, is actually with wart. So 7/16 works, kind of, but 12 millimeters would work better. But anyways, we loosened it, and we're gonna discard it, or actually we're gonna put it in the box with the rest of the parts. Now here you see we have two washers. That's how they come out of the factory. If you still have the two washers there, one of them needs to come out. You see they're slotted. One comes out, one stays there. And instead of that washer, we're gonna put this wave washer that comes with the kit, and then this nut. I want you to notice here that inside this nut there's a set screw, which set screw locks the nut to the shaft when we are done. We're just gonna put this loosely here. We can turn it a little bit with a wrench, so we're gonna take a 1/2-inch wrench and we're gonna tighten it really gently. And what we want is this slot inside to end up, if you're looking from this direction, to end up at 10 and 4 o'clock, which is pretty much where it is right now. You can put something inside the slot that's too big, like this screwdriver, for example. Yeah, that's actually 10 and 4 o'clock, roughly. And with fully open throttle, this slot should become vertical, which it's not. Full throttle, it should be vertical, but it's not. If I put it vertical here, that's fully vertical. How is this going now? This is more like 9 and 3. Okay, I'll put it somewhere in the middle, somewhere here. Now, this is initial adjustment, but then for the final, like a fine adjustment, we have some movement here as well. The sensor fits inside here, but has a little bit of play, and we have these slots here, so we can make the final adjustment here later. So I'm gonna keep it like that. So this is, in my opinion, earlier than 10 and 4, but with fully open throttle, we have it a little bit past vertical. So that's where I'm gonna leave it. So now that we are happy with that, so with 1/8 Allen key, and of course we're gonna have to hold the driving nut in place, and we're gonna lock the screw. Again, I have a huge ratchet here because that's my only 1/8 Allen key, but we have to be gentle here. Okay. So I believe now everything is gonna move together. Okay, that's kind of past vertical, but that's kind of before 10 o'clock. So that's where we're gonna leave it for now. And now next thing is we have to install the bracket. And for the bracket to be installed, we need to remove these two nuts here and lock washers if we have them. This one is kind of easy, but the one underneath is a little bit trickier. I have the feeling that this bracket is bent. I don't think it should be like that. Yeah, so it got bent during transportation, so I think that's how it should be. So let's see if it is gonna fit now. Perfect. Wow, I managed to straighten it perfectly. Now let's put these loosely. Now when I'm thinking about it, maybe it's because I loosened the idle screws. Maybe we should turn them a little bit, just put a little bit of a preload on the shaft. And let's see now where the screwdriver is pointing. Yeah, that's more like 10 and 4, but I have a little bit of play here, so I don't know. We will see. Okay, so now let's make sure that the shaft is right in the center of the thing, because we can play up and down a little bit. So looks like I have to push it down and then tighten, which is gonna bring this bottom leg further in, but we need to make sure that it is centered here. And now when installing the sensor, of course we need to match the notches with this slot, which in theory should be a little bit off the normal position of the sensor, and after it's engaged we have to turn it counterclockwise, and that's going to put a little bit of preload on the mechanism of the sensor. However, here the way it is, it matches straight away, so that makes me think that I might need to have the driving nut a little bit turned this way, maybe just like this, because if it is like this, then you see it fits like that, and then just a little bit of preload and it goes in. But there you go, we have preload here. But in our case, when I let go of the throttle, this just fits as it is. But you know what, I'm just gonna keep it as it is, because there's lots of adjustment here on the sensor itself, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. In the worst case scenario, we're gonna run out of adjustment on the two slots here, and then we're gonna have to move the nut a little bit, but we're gonna be able to figure this out only when we plug in the computer. I'm just gonna check now very gently if with full throttle we have the full range of the sensor. Yeah, we still have more to move. Okay, because we don't want to run out of motion on the mechanism inside before we run out of motion on the throttle shaft, right? Okay, so that looks good. I'm just gonna put the screws here, okay, and we're gonna tighten them just finger tight for now, and we're gonna come back later and we're gonna calibrate it. Let's just plug it in. Okay, and with that, our throttle position sensor is installed and initial setting done. Just needs to be calibrated later. Plug in the temperature sensor again, and we're done with all the wiring. Now we can say that everything is plugged in and there's no more wires to be dealt with. Now let's deal with the fuel supply. But you know what, guys, that's gonna happen in the next episode, because I think we have enough in this one. We converted the distributor, we converted the carburetors to throttle bodies. In the next episode, we're gonna finish the fuel delivery, we're gonna install the fuel pressure regulator, we're gonna finish the vacuum lines. I'm gonna show you how to calibrate the throttle position sensor, how to set up the ignition, the first initial setup of the distributor, and how to set up the fuel pressure. And from there, it's gonna be turning the key. Yay, exciting! But again, that's gonna happen in the next episode. So thank you guys for watching, for commenting, subscribing, sharing, and supporting the channel. That is really really appreciated, and helps me a lot by allowing me to spend more time on the computer editing videos, because without your financial support, I will be just slapping some clips together that I took during the day and upload them. So anyways, I just wanted to tell you that all your support is appreciated. If you are still not supporting the channel and you wish to do so, you can go in the description of this video, and there's a few links there that you can use to support the channel in few different ways, and that would be much appreciated. But if you can't afford it, or you choose not to for whatever reason, I still appreciate you, and I thank you for being here and for being part of the Rusty Beauties community. So anyways, thank you guys. Stay tuned for the next one, in which we're gonna start this baby. So